This is a fictional dramatized story written for storytelling purposes. LeBron James pulled the gray hoodie lower over his forehead as he stepped off the cracked sidewalk on East 79th Street and pushed open the glass door of the Summit House community kitchen. The bell above the entrance gave a tired little ring, the kind of sound that usually made someone look up, smile, and say welcome in a place that claimed to serve the neighborhood. But nobody looked up. Nobody smiled. Nobody even noticed the 6'9" man in worn jeans, scuffed work boots, and a faded Cleveland cap walking into a building his own foundation had helped fund 3 years earlier. That was exactly why he had come. LeBron had spent most of his adult life being recognized before he even entered a room. People heard his name and straightened their backs. Cameras turned. Hands reached out. Voices changed. But on that cold Tuesday morning in Cleveland, at exactly 9:17 a.m., he wanted to be invisible. He wanted to see what happened when nobody thought a billionaire athlete, business owner, or national icon was watching. He wanted the truth. The Summit House had been built as part community kitchen, part youth center, part second-chance workplace. It sat between a pawn shop with barred windows and a laundromat that had been missing 2 letters from its sign since 2018. On paper, it was everything LeBron believed in. Hot meals for families, after-school tutoring, jobs for older workers, training programs for young adults who needed direction, and emergency food assistance for people too proud to ask for help. But over the past 4 months, the numbers had stopped making sense. Donations were steady. Food costs had not changed much. Attendance was up. Volunteers were logging more hours than ever. Yet somehow the emergency meal fund was always short, employee turnover had climbed, and 3 longtime neighborhood families had quietly stopped coming. The monthly report on his desk said operational pressure and staffing challenges. His gut said something else. So he came alone. No cameras. No entourage. No warning. A young woman at the front counter finally glanced at him after he had been standing there for nearly 40 seconds. Her name tag read Brooke. She had glossy nails, tired eyes, and the kind of smile that appeared only because company training required it. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone suggested she hoped he would say no. "Just looking for breakfast," LeBron said, lowering his voice slightly, making it rougher, smaller. "Coffee too, if you got it." Brooke looked him up and down. The worn hoodie, the old jeans, the work boots, the beard tucked partly behind the collar. She tapped the touchscreen with one finger and said, "Breakfast bowl is $6. Coffee is $2. We don't do tabs." "I can pay. Just saying." LeBron slid a $10 bill across the counter. Brooke took it without looking at him again. He carried his coffee and paper bowl to a small table near the side wall where he could see the serving line, the register, the kitchen entrance, and the hallway leading toward the offices. The place looked warm at first glance. Children's drawings taped near the windows. Flyers for free GED classes. A mural of Cleveland painted in bright blues and oranges. A framed photo of LeBron from the ribbon-cutting ceremony hung beside the entrance, though the glass had a thin crack running across his face. That bothered him more than he expected. At 9:31 a.m., he noticed the old man. The man moved slowly but never lazily. He wore a dark green apron with Summit House stitched over the pocket, and his white hair curled out from under a paper kitchen cap. His shoulders were narrow, his hands swollen at the knuckles, and every time he bent to lift a tray of dishes, his jaw tightened for just half a second before he forced it loose again. His name tag read Walter. Walter moved through the kitchen like someone who knew every sound before it happened. He caught a pan before it slid off a counter. He wiped a spill before a teenager carrying juice stepped into it. He pulled a chair out for an elderly woman with a cane, then pretended he had only been passing by so she would not feel embarrassed. When a little boy dropped his toast, Walter crouched with visible pain, picked it up, and returned 2 minutes later with a fresh piece wrapped in a napkin. No one thanked him loudly. Walter did not seem to need it. LeBron watched him for 47 minutes. During that time, Brooke snapped at 2 volunteers, rolled her eyes at 3 customers, and whispered with a man working the second register. The man's name tag read Mason. He was maybe 28, broad-shouldered, with a trimmed beard and a permanent smirk that made every kind word sound like a joke he had not shared yet. At 10:18 a.m., the first crack appeared. A woman came in holding the hand of a little girl in a pink coat. The woman's hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and the knees of her jeans were whitened from wear. She ordered soup, a grilled cheese, and a carton of milk. When Brooke rang her up, the woman searched through her purse, then froze. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I thought I had more on the card. My paycheck clears tonight. Could I maybe leave my phone number and come back after work?" Brooke's face hardened. "We're not a bank." The little girl looked up at her mother. The mother looked down at the counter. That was the kind of silence LeBron recognized. Not quiet. Shame. The room did not stop, but something in it changed. A few people pretended not to hear. A teenage volunteer stared at the floor. Mason leaned against the second register, watching like he was waiting for entertainment. Before the woman could speak again, Walter appeared beside her. "I got it, Miss Carla," he said, already reaching into the pocket of his apron. "You tell Nia here that grilled cheese tastes better when somebody else pays for it." The little girl smiled, uncertain at first. "I'll pay you back Friday," Carla whispered. Walter waved one swollen hand. "Friday is for fish fries and football arguments. Don't worry about me." He slipped exact change onto the counter. $7.83. Brooke took the money with a little shake of her head. Mason leaned closer and muttered, just loud enough for LeBron to hear, "There goes Grandpa's retirement plan." Brooke covered her laugh with a cough. Walter heard it. LeBron knew he did because one of Walter's hands paused on the edge of the counter. But the old man did not turn around. He only gave the little girl an extra napkin and went back to the dish station. LeBron's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. The cardboard bent. For the next 2 hours, he watched the same pattern repeat in smaller ways. Walter carried more than his body wanted to carry. Walter fixed mistakes he had not made. Walter covered for younger workers who ignored him until they needed him. At 11:47 a.m., a teenage boy came in with a backpack held together by duct tape and ordered chili. His card declined twice. Walter appeared without being called and paid the remaining $3.17. Mason saw it. Brooke saw it. They smiled at each other in a way that made LeBron's stomach turn. Near noon, LeBron asked an older man sitting at the next table, "That worker, Walter, he been here long?" The man looked over, then softened. "Walter Reed? 5 years. Maybe 6. Good man. Better than this place deserves some days." "What's his story?" The man studied LeBron for a moment, deciding whether a stranger had earned the answer. Then he leaned back and sighed. "Lost his wife to kidney failure. Treatment bills took their house over in Parma. He moved into a room behind his brother's old garage, but the brother passed last winter. Now the property's being sold. Walter's got until the end of the month to get out." LeBron looked toward the kitchen. Walter was rinsing trays, moving with quiet precision. "He got family. A daughter in Columbus. He tells everybody she's doing fine. But the truth is she's got 2 kids and a husband recovering from a stroke. Walter sends her money when he can. Won't tell her he needs help. Proud as a church bell." The man took a sip of coffee, then added, "He pays for people's meals because he says hunger has a sound. Says once you've heard it in your own house, you can hear it anywhere." LeBron did not answer. Some sentences did not need a response. At 1:22 p.m., the lunch rush thinned. Brooke wiped the counter slowly, glancing toward Walter. Mason stood beside her, counting bills from the register, but his hands moved too casually for someone doing math. LeBron opened a folded newspaper he had brought as cover and lowered his head. Their voices dropped. "But not enough. I'm telling you," Mason said. "The old man is a liability. He makes us look bad." Brooke snorted. "He makes you look bad because customers actually like him. They like a sob story. That's different." Mason tapped something into the register. "Besides, Denise is already asking questions about the emergency fund being off." Denise would be Denise Parker, the site manager. LeBron had met her twice. Efficient, polished, always ready with the right answer when donors were in the room. Brooke lowered her voice further. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying Walter keeps putting money in the drawer for people who can't pay. Denise doesn't know that. She just sees weird numbers. Cash going in after orders close. Adjustments. Voids. If a little more money disappears, and somebody says they saw him near the register." Brooke's face changed. The board cruelty became interest. "You want to make it look like he's stealing." "I want to solve a staffing problem," Mason said. "My cousin needs work. He's fast. Young. Doesn't limp around like a haunted scarecrow. Walter gets fired, cousin gets hired, Denise stops complaining, and we split the referral bonus." Brooke laughed under her breath. That is awful, but smart. She looked toward the dish station. Walter had his back turned. When? Tomorrow. Denise does weekly reconciliation at 10:30. We push the drawer short by 70, maybe $80. Then you tell her Walter was hovering around the register after helping some broke customer. Brooke smiled. Poor Walter. LeBron kept his eyes on the newspaper. Inside him, something went still. Anger was easy. He had lived with anger before. On courts. In headlines. In rooms where people smiled in public and doubted him in private. But this was not the clean anger of competition. This was heavier. This was watching someone strong enough to help others while barely surviving himself. Then realizing the people beside him were not just laughing at him. They were hunting him. LeBron left at 2:06 p.m. He did not go far. Across the street, inside a rented black pickup with tinted windows, he made 4 phone calls. One to his foundation's legal director. One to the private security contractor who had installed the original cameras at Summit House. One to a retired Cleveland police captain he trusted. And one to a woman named Angela Brooks, who ran a nonprofit that helped working families facing eviction. By sunset, a plan was in motion. But first, LeBron needed to know how deep the rot went. That evening, he waited 2 blocks away until Walter left the building. It was 7:14 p.m., more than 2 hours after his scheduled shift ended. The old man came out carrying a plastic grocery bag and a dented thermos. He walked with the careful stiffness of someone negotiating with pain. His car was an old tan Ford Taurus with rust along the wheel wells and one brake light dimmer than the other. LeBron followed from a distance. Walter drove west, away from the brighter streets, past a boarded-up church, past a closed auto parts store, past a row of houses where porch lights burned like small acts of resistance. He turned behind a storage facility and parked beside a detached garage with peeling white paint. A small room had been built onto the back of it with plywood, mismatched siding, and a window unit sealed with duct tape. Walter unlocked the door and stepped inside. A single lamp came on. The room looked smaller than LeBron's closet. For several minutes, LeBron sat in the truck without moving. He thought about the building with his foundation's logo on the wall. He thought about glossy annual reports filled with words like dignity, opportunity, and community. He thought about ribbon cuttings and speeches and photographs. Then he looked at the little room behind the garage, where an old man who embodied those values more than anyone on a stage was living one bad week from nowhere. The truth did not whisper anymore. It shouted. The next morning, LeBron returned in the same hoodie, same cap, same boots. The hidden cameras had been installed before dawn in areas where recording was legally permitted, above the front counter, near the register, and in the hallway facing the office door. Audio capture had been approved by management contracts already signed years earlier, though apparently nobody on-site remembered that clause. At 9:03 a.m., Walter arrived. At 9:26, Brooke arrived. At 9:31, Mason came in with a paper cup of coffee and the relaxed confidence of a man who thought the day already belonged to him. LeBron took his usual table. This time, he ordered only black coffee. The first hour passed normally, if normal meant Walter doing invisible labor while others treated him like old furniture. He replaced an empty napkin dispenser. He helped a volunteer lift a stock pot. He quietly asked a homeless veteran named Ray if he wanted his sandwich wrapped for later. When Ray nodded, embarrassed, Walter wrapped too. At 10:12 a.m., Angela Brooks entered with a woman and a boy of about 8. The woman's name was Melissa Grant. She really was a single mother. She really had missed 2 rent payments after her hours were cut at a nursing home. But she had agreed to help LeBron expose the truth, and every bill she carried in her purse had been counted in advance. She ordered oatmeal, eggs, and orange juice for her son. When she came to pay, she opened her purse and let her face fall. "Oh no," she whispered. "I'm short. I'm so sorry. I thought I had $11. Brooke's eyes sharpened. She glanced at Mason. "Total is $12.49, Brooks said. "You have to pay the full amount." "I have 9:32, Melissa said. "Could I leave my number and come back after my shift? My son has a reading test today. I just wanted him to eat first." Mason stepped closer. "Ma'am, this isn't a charity buffet." The words hung there, ugly and stupid, beneath a sign that read "No neighbor leaves hungry." Walter appeared from the kitchen almost instantly. "I'll cover it," he said. Brooke gave an exaggerated sigh. Of course you will. Walter ignored her and placed $3.17 on the counter. Melissa looked at him with tears in her eyes. Thank you. Walter bent slightly toward the boy. You passed that reading test, young man. Then one day you come back and teach me all the big words. The boy smiled. LeBron watched Mason watch Walter. The trap had opened. At 10:41 a.m., Mason removed a $20 bill from the register while pretending to organize receipts. At 10:49, Brooke voided 2 paid orders after the customers had left. At 11:03, Mason told a volunteer to ask Walter for help moving boxes near the office hallway. At 11:07, Brooke called Denise Parker from the back office. By 11:13, Denise came out holding a clipboard. She wore a cream blazer and the pinched expression of someone prepared to be disappointed. Her eyes moved from the register to Walter to the people seated in the dining area. She lowered her voice at first, but not enough to keep the room from feeling it. We need to do a cash count, Denise said. Mason lifted both hands. I hate to say this, but I think you're going to find a problem. Brooke looked down, pretending reluctance. I saw Walter near the drawer again. Walter had just come through the kitchen door, carrying a crate of clean mugs. He stopped when he heard his name. Near the drawer, he asked. Mason turned with practiced sadness. Walter, man, nobody wants this to be true. What to be true? Denise counted quickly. Once. Twice. Her mouth tightened. We're short $84.76. A low murmur moved through the room. Walter set the crate down carefully. I don't understand. Denise looked at him as though she had rehearsed the regret. Walter, there have been irregularities all week. Cash shortages. Unauthorized drawer activity. Staff have reported seeing you near the register several times. I put money in when someone can't pay, Walter said. I don't take it out. Brooke folded her arms. On your wages? That one landed. Walter's face changed, not with anger, but with hurt. It was the look of a man whose poverty had been dragged into the light and mocked before strangers. Mason stepped forward. Come on, Walter. Maybe it started small. Maybe you told yourself you'd put it back. People get desperate. Walter looked at him for a long moment. Something in his eyes said he finally understood. Not the missing money. The setup. I have been desperate, Walter said quietly. But I have never been a thief. Denise exhaled. I'm sorry. Company policy requires immediate termination pending investigation. The dining room went silent. A spoon clinked against a bowl, then stopped. Ray, the veteran, pushed himself halfway out of his chair. Carla, the mother from the day before, covered her mouth. Melissa pulled her son closer. Walter stood very still, hands red from dishwater, shoulders bent, but not broken. I see, Walter said. He untied his apron slowly. That was when LeBron stood. At first, no one noticed. He rose from the small table near the wall, tall, but still hidden beneath the hoodie and cap. He walked toward the counter with the unhurried pace of a man who had learned long ago that power did not need to rush. Before you fire him, LeBron said, you might want to check the cameras. Denise turned sharply. Sir, this is an internal matter. I know. Mason frowned. And the cameras don't work. LeBron reached up and removed the cap. The room changed before anyone spoke. Recognition moved across faces like sunrise hitting windows one by one. Brooke's mouth opened. Denise went pale. A teenager near the mural whispered, no way. Ray stood all the way up now, blinking hard. Walter stared, confused at first, then stunned. LeBron James stood beneath the cracked framed photo of himself and looked directly at the people who had mistaken humility for weakness. The cameras work now, he said. No one moved. Denise's voice came out small. Mr. James, I didn't know you were visiting today. That was the point. He pulled a small tablet from the pocket of his hoodie and tapped the screen. The television mounted near the front wall flickered from a muted morning news show to security footage from less than an hour earlier. There was Mason at the register, sliding a $20 bill into his own pocket. A gasp cut through the room. The footage changed. There was Brooke voiding paid orders after customers left. Another gasp. The footage changed again. There were Mason and Brooke the previous afternoon, leaning close at the counter, their voices captured clearly enough for every person in the room to hear. If a little more money disappears, and somebody says they saw him near the register, you want to make it look like he's stealing. I want to solve a staffing problem. Brooke began to cry immediately, but it sounded more like fear than remorse. Mason's face hardened, then twitched, as though he was trying to find an exit inside his own skin. LeBron paused the video on Mason's smirk. "This," he said, "is not a misunderstanding. This is theft. This is conspiracy. This is elder abuse in a workplace that was built to protect dignity, not destroy it." Mason lifted his chin. "You can't just record people. Our legal team can explain the consent language in your employment agreement," LeBron said. "The police can explain the rest." At that exact moment, two officers entered through the front door with Angela Brooks and the retired Captain LeBron had called the day before. Mason turned toward the side hallway, but Ray stepped into his path, not touching him, not threatening him, just standing there with the quiet authority of a man who had seen worse men make worse decisions. "Don't," Ray said. Mason stopped. Brooks sobbed into both hands as the officers approached. "I didn't take that much. It was his idea." Mason snapped, "Shut up." The words were sharp enough to reveal him completely. For the first time, Walter spoke. "Why?" he asked. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The question moved through the room and stripped away every excuse. Mason looked at Walter, then at the customers, then at LeBron. His pride fought for one last inch of ground. "Because you were in the way," he said. "Everybody acts like you're some saint because you hand out pocket change. But you slow everything down. You make this place feel like a shelter instead of a professional operation." Walter nodded slowly, absorbing each word. LeBron stepped closer. "This place is supposed to be a shelter when people need shelter. It is supposed to be food when people need food. It is supposed to be a hand on the shoulder when someone is too ashamed to ask for one. If that embarrasses you, you never understood the mission." Denise lowered her head. LeBron turned to her. "And you should have." Her eyes filled. "I trusted the reports. You trusted the wrong people and ignored the right one." The officers escorted Mason and Brooke out. Mason still tried to look angry, but the anger had gone thin. Brooke kept saying she was sorry, first to the officers, then to Denise, then to LeBron. Only when she passed Walter did her voice change. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I really am." Walter looked at her for a long moment. "I hope one day you are," he said. That broke her more than shouting would have. By 12:06 p.m., the police cars were gone. But nobody returned to eating as if nothing had happened. People stood in clusters, whispering, crying, shaking Walter's hand. Carla hugged him. Melissa's son gave him a drawing from his backpack, a crooked basketball with the words "Thank you, Mr. Walter" written beneath it. Ray placed one hand over his heart and nodded. Walter looked overwhelmed. LeBron saw it and guided him gently toward the office. Inside, the noise of the dining room faded. The office smelled like printer toner and lemon cleaner. A motivational poster on the wall read "Leadership is service." LeBron looked at it and almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it had been hanging there while Walter washed dishes in pain and slept behind a garage. Walter sat slowly in the chair across from the desk. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "You don't have to say anything yet," LeBron replied. "I do." Walter folded his hands. The knuckles were cracked. The nails were clean. LeBron sat across from him, not behind the desk. "I built programs like this because of people like my mother," LeBron said. "Because I know what it means when a meal, a ride, a uniform, or one adult who cares can change the whole direction of a kid's day. Maybe their life." But somewhere between the ribbon cutting and the quarterly reports, I stopped seeing the details. I let layers of management tell me the story instead of coming here and listening to the people living it. Walter shook his head. "You've done a lot for this city. That doesn't excuse what I missed." The room grew quiet. LeBron opened a folder on the desk. "I know about your wife, Evelyn. I know about the medical debt. I know about the room behind the garage and the property sale. I know you've been sending money to your daughter while telling her you're doing fine." Walter's face tightened. "She has enough on her plate. She said the same thing about you." Walter looked up sharply. LeBron's voice softened. "I spoke with her this morning. Her name is Rebecca, right?" Walter swallowed. "You called my daughter?" "I did. And before you get mad, you should know she cried for about 3 minutes, then spent 7 telling me how stubborn you are." For the first time all day, Walter almost smiled. "She gets that from her mother." LeBron slid the folder across the desk. "Your remaining medical debt has been paid in full. The eviction issue is handled. And there is a small house on Bexley Avenue, 12 minutes from here, already transferred into a housing trust in your name. No mortgage. No rent. No conditions. Walter did not touch the folder. He stared at it, as if it might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Mr. James," he said, voice breaking, "I can't accept that." "You can. It's too much. It's late." Walter closed his eyes. LeBron continued, "You've given this place 5 years of work, dignity, and compassion. You paid for meals out of your own pocket, while people with more authority than character questioned your worth. This is not charity. This is overdue respect." A tear slipped down Walter's cheek, then another. He wiped them away quickly, embarrassed by his own emotion. "I was just trying to help where I could," he said. "I know. That's why it matters." LeBron opened a second folder. "Starting today, if you want it, you are no longer washing dishes. I'd like you to become director of community care for the Summit House. Full salary, full benefits, flexible hours. Your job will be to teach this organization what dignity looks like from the ground up." Walter gave a weak laugh through tears. "I don't have a degree. You have something harder to earn." "What's that?" "Trust." When they walked back into the dining room, the entire building seemed to be holding its breath. Denise stood near the counter, eyes red. Volunteers lined the wall. Customers filled every table. Even people outside had gathered near the windows after hearing what had happened. LeBron stopped in the center of the room beside Walter. "I owe this community an apology," he said. Nobody interrupted. The Summit House was created to protect dignity. Today, we saw what happens when a mission becomes a slogan instead of a standard. Walter Reed lived that mission every day, even when the system failed to honor him. That changes now. He turned toward Denise. "Effective immediately, this site will undergo a full independent audit. Every employee will receive renewed training on elder respect, wage fairness, and community care. The emergency meal fund will be protected by transparent reporting. And every Summit House location will move to a living wage policy with medical benefits, hardship assistance, and a direct anonymous reporting line that does not pass through local management." People began to clap, but LeBron raised one hand. "And one more thing. Today we are creating the Walter Reed Neighbor Fund. It will cover meals, emergency rent support, medical transportation, and basic needs for families who fall short by $3, $30, or 3 bad months. No one will have to be humiliated at that counter again." The room erupted. This time Walter did not hide from it. He stood there trembling, one hand pressed over his heart, as people rose to their feet. Carla cried openly. Melissa's son cheered because everyone else was cheering. Ray saluted. Denise clapped through tears, knowing her own future in the organization would be decided by the investigation, but also knowing she had just seen leadership she could never fake. Walter turned to LeBron and whispered, "Evelyn would have liked this." LeBron nodded. "Then we better do it right." In the weeks that followed, the Summit House changed in ways people could feel before they could measure. The cracked photo near the entrance was replaced, but LeBron insisted Walter's picture hang beside it. Not a polished publicity photo. A simple image of Walter standing in the dining room with his green apron folded over one arm, smiling like a man still learning what safety felt like. The new meal policy removed shame from the counter. Families who could pay did. Families who could not were served without a scene. Volunteers were trained to recognize need without turning it into spectacle. The emergency fund ledger was posted monthly, not with names, but with numbers. 217 meals covered, 38 rides to medical appointments, 11 rent emergencies stabilized, 6 utility shutoffs prevented. Specific numbers. Real lives. Mason and Brooke faced charges for theft and fraud. Mason tried blaming pressure, management, and confusion, but the video left little room for performance. Brooke cooperated with investigators and entered a restitution agreement. Months later, she wrote Walter a letter from a court-mandated ethics program. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, and stained in one corner as though she had cried over it. Walter read it twice. Then he folded it carefully and placed it in his desk. He did not excuse what she had done, but he did hope she became better than the worst thing she had done. As for Denise, the audit found negligence, but no theft. She was removed from management and reassigned only after completing training under outside supervision. On her last day at Summit House, she found Walter adjusting chairs before a community dinner. "I should have listened," she said. Walter looked at her, not unkindly. "Yes," he said, "you should have. That was all." Some lessons do not need decoration. 3 months later, on a rainy Friday evening, LeBron returned to the Summit House without a disguise. This time the bell rang and half the room turned. Kids shouted his name. Parents smiled. Volunteers waved from behind the serving line. But LeBron's eyes went first to Walter, who stood near the counter helping a young father fill out an assistance form without making him feel small. Walter looked healthier, not younger. Life does not reverse itself like that, but steadier. His shoulders had lifted. His hands still hurt, but he no longer hid the pain while carrying loads meant for younger backs. He had a home now, a proper bed, a porch with 2 chairs, and every Sunday night he called Rebecca on video from his own kitchen. At 6:43 p.m., the dinner rush slowed. A little boy approached the counter with a dollar bill, 3 quarters, and a handful of pennies. "I don't got enough," he told Walter. Walter leaned down. "For what?" "2 soups. One for me and one for my grandma." Walter looked at the boy, then at the dining room, then at the sign above the counter. No neighbor leaves hungry. This time, he did not reach into his own pocket. He did not have to. He tapped a button on the register labeled Neighbor Fund and printed a receipt for $0.00. The boy frowned. "So I don't know." Walter smiled. "You owe somebody kindness when you get the chance." The boy considered this seriously, then nodded as if accepting a sacred contract. Across the room, LeBron watched without saying a word. That was the moment he knew the place had finally become what it had always claimed to be. Not because a famous man had walked in. Not because cameras had exposed the truth. Not because the guilty had been punished, though they had been. But because one old man's quiet goodness had forced an entire system to become less cruel. The world often notices power when it arrives with noise, money, cameras, and applause. But sometimes power wears a stained apron. Sometimes it has swollen hands. Sometimes it pays the last $3.17 for a hungry child and walks away before anyone can say thank you. And sometimes, when the right person finally sees it, that quiet kindness changes everything.